girls and boys, to today's stream where we are going to talk about Gainz. And I always say I have a good friend of mine here. I literally just barely met you backstage, but a good friend of mine, Zach, here joining me to field any of your questions, guys. As you file into this thing, feel free to leave any questions in the chat. If you're catching this on the replay, just leave them in the comments. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, recommend to your friends, all that good stuff. And we'll kick it off. Zach, up to anything exciting today
Well,
in the
just
physique
been,
world?
well, I'm going to be training in a little bit, but today's a rest day. So I've just been getting in my meals, and I'm currently 2 weeks out from competition. So keeping things minimal right now.
Do you do actual rest days? Or are they more like active rest days?
Since I'm doing cardio, they're active rest days. So when I'm
Mhm.
not training weights, I'm still doing cardio.
Well, guys that follow my stream, I mentioned I had a mild surgery done last week, so the doctor gave me a month out of the gym, and I'm dying. It's so terrible. I'm doing cardio, but
Right.
you don't realize how awesome lifting weights is until you can't do it. And I'm only like 10 days in, so I've got 20 days left. It's like serving a small prison sentence.
Man, no, my favorite's weightlifting. Like I like cardio, but nothing beats going in and pumping some iron because it's just better, in my
It
opinion.
is, and I train to the point now where when I was younger, and we'll get into this. You have to
Hmm.
put in a few years in your physique in terms of building your baseline, is what I like to call it. But as you get older, you don't really have to do much anymore weights wise. So in the progressive overload type schema, you can only go so high in weight before bones and tendons and that stuff starts giving out. So I went the other
Yes.
way a few years ago, and then I was like, okay, what are the other variables I can adjust? Because a lot of guys think it's only increasing the weight with progressive
Hmm.
overload, but you can increase time under tension, you can reduce rest time, you can increase frequency or volume. There's other variables to play with. Your rep
Exactly.
scheme that falls under the broader category of volume. So a few years ago, I started doing it to where I rest for like 15 seconds between sets, and all my workouts are less than an hour. So that's a cardio session right there, which
Right.
is nice. I don't
Exactly.
really do dedicated cardio anymore unless I'm like you in like a
Hmm.
couple weeks out from an event or something to where I was going to ask, do you do low intensity steady state, or are you more of a hit type fan or
I'm more
some
of
sort of
a
hybrid?
I'm more of a steady state because I believe in like, especially for when you're stepping on stage, you want to keep everything consistent. So when you're doing cardio, I'll do treadmill and incline. Um, at the same, I don't really track heart rate. I just go by levels, but I keep that consistent throughout the entirety of prep. That way, nothing changes on my body. Because if I were to do high intensity, it could make my physique kind of look a little funky, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because I used to fall into that hit camp years ago, and then I realized the first time I got actual lean, like bodybuilder level lean, I didn't do it
Hmm.
with hit. I think hit's great for overall conditioning,
Yep.
especially for guys that maybe aren't in the bodybuilding type environment. But I noticed that same thing as you said. My physique
Mhm.
responds a lot better with low intensity steady state or LISS for those that want acronyms.
Exactly, exactly.
So let's start from the very beginning. First of all, introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Where are you from? What are you up to? And what do you got going on in the content world? And then we'll dive into your origin story.
Yeah, so my name is Zach Aldrich. I'm based in Oregon, and I started my journey back in 2019. So I'm 22 now. I was 17 then, and I'd say my first year was really the biggest learning curve on, trial and error. And then the past 3 to 4 years was really focused in on optimizing my muscle growth and training. So, and then content wise, now that I built a I call a reasonable physique, I started putting content out there and helping other people with that because I want I want to help out the people that are starting where I started. So,
And I was going to ask also, where did you start? So for me, I got in the gym because I was I was 100 pounds overweight at one point, and I had
oh
like no
wow.
muscle to speak of. So when you're a kid and you're obese, you actually don't you screw up your endocrine system. So I had kind of a
Mhm.
stunted puberty. When I go to the doctor, like they tell me things like should have had a couple inches left to grow, but I think all of that extra weight it just kind of screws your body up. So for me
Yes.
and for a lot of guys, it's more of an identity thing that okay, I don't like the person in the mirror looking back at me. I was grossly overweight. I had to lose all the weight first and then get into the gym. And a lot of
Hmm.
guys, I think most guys fall into kind of the hard gainer category. Most guys that reach out to me ask me, things like, hey, I'm 27 years old, I'm 132 pounds, and I want to put on 50 pounds of muscle. How do I do that? I was like, dude, I was 132 pounds when I was 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there. So I'm
Right.
curious which angle you came from. Were you a really skinny guy or really fat guy before, or were you my
Mhm.
brothers were never as fat as I was, just natural athletes. So
Right.
naturally they just were in the gym all the time too. So I'm curious what your genesis was there.
Yeah, so in the beginning, I did a lot of running. So I used to run 5 miles a day. So I was a more of a skinny kind of. I started off just a hard gainer, if you will. I started at 150 pounds, and like I said, I used to be a runner, so I didn't know anything on how to get jacked. So I started off not scrawny, but kind of skinny fat in a sense. So the first year was really just about gaining weight. That's really what it was.
Mhm.
I come from wanting to get bigger instead of wanting to lose weight.
Yeah, so we can get into this here in a bit. The
Mhm.
different body types. So people ask me all the time, like, "Wow, for your size, I'm 5'11", and I usually walk around at 190. If I want to be super, like, if I have like a fitness model photo shoot, I'll get down to like 184, 185. That's kind of my
Mhm.
sweet spot for like you get crazy striations when you get super lean, but for walking
Exactly.
around, I like to be just kind of somewhere in the middle. Like I like to go out. I like to eat crap every now and then. I like to have a drink every now and then. So my
Right.
walking around weight, but at peak fatness, I was 285. And for me, I did get about 100 pounds off. And then I did the bulk cut thing for years and years. And guys always ask me, like, oh my God, you must be eating all the time. But I've got the body type, which is the endomorphic body type naturally, to where I actually don't eat that much. I eat about 2,000 calories a day, and I maintain, I just don't lose mass, which is nice, but it really sucked when I had to take the weight off. I mean, it was a slow and go process. It wasn't a turn and burn. So I'm
Oh yeah.
curious, what are your current stats and what were your starting stats? And then how'd you get from where you started and where you are now? Or if you went through phases, what did those look like?
Yeah, so right now I'm sitting at 195. I'm at the leanest. So I went this past off season I was 220 pounds. So it's about a decent weight cut. Um, right now, I'm just trying to get as lean as I can. When I
Mhm.
first started, though, I was in the phase of trying to bulk. So going from my first 2 years of bulking, I went from 150 to 250. I
You
looked,
went the other way I did. That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. So mine was the complete opposite. Yeah, so I was going from
Uh-huh.
trying to lose or trying to gain weight. And the first phase that I did is like I ended up hiring a bodybuilding coach. And he's like, okay, well, we need to bulk up first. So I just went through a massive bulking phase. Um, so I'd say after my first year, that's when I started putting on real size. So it was a bulk phase for about a year and a half.
And I'm assuming when you started, you didn't have high levels of body fat percentage. So a lot of guys that reach out to me are kind of in my camp. They're significantly overweight or they're carrying a bunch of body fat. And
Hmm.
I don't know if you train guys, if you'll hear this, you'll have a guy come 40, 60, 80, even 100 pounds plus overweight. And they'll say things like, well, I need to get in the gym. I need to start training. I need to put on muscle. It's like, dude, you need to lose the fat first. Your body
Yeah.
is so stressed out. Your organs are stressed. Your hormones are off. Your diet, I know, is shit because otherwise you wouldn't look like that. Get the weight
Hmm.
off first. So it seems like you went the other way to where you're relatively lean to begin with, and then it's
Hmm.
just put on mass, put on mass.
Exactly. Um, here's how I like to approach it, though, in all senses. So, most people that come up to me, they're wanting to gain weight, but I've worked with some people that wanted to lose weight. In both scenarios, I'll have them do a mini cut. So, I'll start them off with maintenance, and then we'll put them in a deficit for a little bit, just to make sure that they get at a consistent rate, and then we'll slowly start bulking up. Now, when you're trying to lose weight, you have to go through a deficit first, regardless. But for the guys that are trying to gain weight, I put them at maintenance, and then I'll put them in a slight decline, and then I'll raise up the food and then get them bulking. So it's like a reverse diet type situation.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting methodology. I'm curious
Hmm.
why you go about that route. I have some ideas at the top of my head, but I'm curious because again, I have different considerations, and we all have different
Yeah.
considerations based on your genetics and your physique and your environment, uh, budget permitting, schedule permitting, all that good stuff. But I'm
Mhm.
curious why you start them with the reverse diet first.
Yeah, so I come from a bodybuilding background, and I'm just a big fan on how bodybuilding works in our world. Well, the reason why we cut down for shows is so we can rebound and actually grow a lot more. So we put our body in a
That was the
deficit.
idea I had.
Exactly. So we'll go in a deep cut, like a deep cut, get really, really lean, and then we'll rebound out so then our body absorbs all the food. And it builds up momentum and slingshots you into a good that way when you're going from a cut and you start bulking, you're actually holding on to everything instead of gaining too much fat. So then you actually start gaining weight and gaining muscle, and you actually get lean in the process. So you're not getting fat.
I've noticed that in my journey too. It's easy,
Hmm.
and that's why I have my guys, especially if they're considerably overweight. Even guys, I'll have guys that they'll say, "Hey, I'm 15% body fat. Like, let's get you down to single digits, and then we'll do a bulk." One, it teaches them how to diet, especially if they're
Yep.
brand new.
Yeah.
It builds that discipline muscle. But
Hmm.
two, I've noticed with me too, if I get down to single digit body fat, and even if I do a dirty bulk, it's pretty lean. Whereas when I took the 100 pounds off, I didn't know how to train or diet or anything properly yet. I just pretty much starved myself and just walked everywhere for a year.
Right.
But that snapback effect for that first cut or for that first bulk cut cycle I did. I think I got to like 235 pounds or something again. So half the weight I lost, I put back on, but it was about a
Mm.
pound of body fat per pound of muscle. I didn't do it right. Whereas
Yeah.
now, if I want to bulk, I don't put on a lot of body fat anymore. But again, I'm a proponent of the idea, and this is just bro science or based on my
Yeah.
anecdotal experience, to where
Oh yeah.
the leaner I am, the easier it is to bulk or cut. And the longer I've been leaner, then I notice I track all my new routines too. For the last year, I tried a bunch of different things with my body, and it just stayed exactly the same. It's like, okay, well, I've been fitter longer than I've been fat, so maybe this
Yeah.
is just the new baseline.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan too. I'm not a very science-based approach. Like I know, a decent amount, but I'm just like I said, bodybuilding. I'm a big fan because a lot of it's just trial and error. Like let's just see how
Yep.
this works and change along the way. And I've gotten the best results myself doing that, and then working with other people, it flows so much better that way.
Yeah, I took the same approach to where for first 10 years or so, I never got into the bodybuilding thing early out. It was more
Mhm.
so just generalized health. But as I started
Mhm.
getting older, when I was reaching 30 or so, I was like, oh no, I'm an old man now. The game's over for me. And then I took it really seriously. I started doing the science thing. I hired a bodybuilding coach too. Uh,
Mhm.
you're young. I'm glad you're doing it right out the gate. You have a lot of runway left, and you're going to do some really cool things with your physique.
I
For me, it
appreciate
was more so when I got into my early 30s. I was like, all right, well, I want to age gracefully. I have really healthy
that.
people in my family. Well, I have two sides. I've got really healthy people that live forever and they're strong and they're lucid and they still have all their mental faculties together. And then
Mhm.
those that aren't healthy and they live pretty miserable lives. So I'm like, all right, I've got two paths to go down. So for me, it
Yes.
was more just general overall health optimization. But like you said, I've been at it for 20 years or so. Didn't take it seriously for the first 10, maybe even 12 years. But once
Mhm.
I started testing all these new variables and figuring out if I do this, this is what happens. And you have that over a longer period of time, then you can do really cool stuff. So I combine all sorts of crazy stuff now. I'll do carb cycling, calorie cycling. I remember when I first started doing intermittent fasting, I had the 16-hour window, then a 20-hour window, then now it's
Oh
just one
boy.
meal a day, but I'll do
Yeah.
extended fasts. The opposite of what you said for the rebound effect, where you'll cut them down and they'll snap back fast with increased muscle gain. I think that's more of a hyper compensatory effect because you put the body in one extreme and then the pendulum swings the other way and goes to the other extreme. I'll do that when
Exactly.
I'm cutting. I'll do like two pizzas and a baker's dozen of donuts on a Sunday, and then skip 2 days of eating or just do protein only. And then
Mm.
Wednesday, it's like my skin just shrink wraps on
Ooh,
me. So
yeah.
so when you try all these things at first and then you know what's going to happen, then you can combine and
Yes.
you can do some really fun stuff with your physique.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Like, especially with people that don't know what they're doing, I always just keep it simple. But then, as you go through like you said, you go through your journey and you learn what works best for you. Stick with those, and you'll get great results. Because I mean, it's because in the beginning, you hear about intermittent fasting and all those fun things, and it's a little confusing. But like I said, like it's
It's a little more
better to
advanced, I think.
It is, and I say start with the fundamentals, but then throughout time, don't be afraid to try new things, and if it works, stick with that. And if it doesn't work, then try something different. And it's just a process, just like what you were saying. That's what I've noticed.
And it's really fun. So I'm curious, going back to when you were first starting out, was it hard for you to get into the gym coming from more of a runner's background, or did you just take to it almost immediately?
I took to it almost immediately, because growing up, my mom, she did CrossFit, so she tried getting me into
Mhm.
CrossFit. I did not like CrossFit because I like running,
It's
but
rough on your joints and tendons and all that
it's
stuff.
especially on my nervous system. I don't know how many
Mhm.
times I had to stop and puke and stuff. But once I found the gym and I just lifted weights, like just you doing your bodybuilding stuff, I instantly just stuck with it. So that wasn't a challenge for me. It was pretty easy getting into it.
Yeah, people call me weird when I say this, but I
Mhm.
find the gym almost meditative.
Yeah.
There are times if I'm having a bad day, then I'll put on real aggressive alternative rock or gangster rap from the '90s or
Yeah.
something. But and I'll let it out. But usually, I'm just kind of I'm dancing, I'm grooving, I'm having a good time. I really enjoy the sensation of breaking
Yeah.
down your muscle fiber or being
Oh,
in a
me.
more hypertrophic state, hypertrophy.
Yeah, well, and I'm the same way with you too there. When I go in, it's just it's I put on the headphones, I get so focused that nothing else around you really matters besides doing your sets and stuff. And it's just you get in this focus of like it is like meditative state because you're so focused in on I need to do this much reps, I need to do this much weight. And it just it taught me a lot of focus, on hyper focus, and I do find it very meditative as well.
And for people who are new to the space, I remember when I was first getting in the gym, you'd always hear you watch all the old school golden era bodybuilders like the Arnold Pump and Iron documentary, and he
Oh
always
yeah.
talks about the mind muscle connection, and that was
Hmm.
foreign to me until I started lifting weights, and then you can literally move your consciousness. Let's say I'm doing biceps, you can almost move it there, and then feel as though you're from the perspective of the bicep, and you get really
Yes.
into your body. And I think
Mhm.
that there are levels of meditation or types of meditation where you do precisely that. You get in your body, you focus, you tense, and then you release. So I think just by virtue of that avenue of just lifting weights, I do find myself almost in a Zen like state or a flow state. And it spills over into the rest of my life too. I'm just a
Yeah.
little sharper at work. I'm just a little less tired at night. I fall asleep immediately. I wake up when the sun comes up well before my alarm goes off. And I
Yes.
notice again, I'm 10 days off from lifting weights, and things aren't things aren't as tight as they are when you're in there just doing it every day.
Oh, and I agree with you 100%. Like once I got into the gym, it literally just like I said, like the focus and discipline you get going to the gym, it will translate. Because let's just say you're going through a rough diet or training's hard. You know, in those moments, it's super hard and it doesn't feel good. But as long as you keep pushing through, it'll be good. And when you apply that to other aspects of life, you're able to push through a little bit longer than you would, let's say, if you don't go to the gym. So I think the gym in general, it's more than just looking good. It really does set you up mindset wise, and it helps out in every aspect of life. I have the same experience as that.
And I always say this too, that a lot of times the physique or what's on the exterior, because there's this whole body positivity movement, and
Yeah.
you'll hear people say, "Oh, big and beautiful," or "beautiful at any size," things like that. But I always tell people, but your exterior is a reflection of what's on the interior. And I've noticed with
Yeah.
me that when I have a strong body, I have a strong mind, I have a strong will, and I'm able to weather the storm when things come up in life, which is inevitable. And I personally, I do judge people based on their physique. Now I understand if
Hmm.
they don't know what they're doing, or if they're just getting started and they have a long way to go. I've been there, and I'm sure you've been there too. But
Oh
for
yeah.
people that have that attitude to, are like, oh, you don't need to be in the gym. Oh, you must be arrogant, you must be conceited, you must be a narcissist. I'm like, I don't spend a lot of time in the gym. It's something I do every day, like taking a shower or changing my clothes or brushing my teeth. It's just
Hmm.
part of who I am. But I've noticed that when I meet other people, those who take care of their physique, their mind is a lot sharper too. They're a lot more
Oh yeah.
lucid. They're just there. They're alive.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you on that. The whole body positivity movement, and I'm just gonna say this. I think it's an excuse of not taking care of yourself. I really
I do
think
too.
that, you know what I mean? Like society's made it to where it's okay to be out of shape. It's okay. It's more of a crutch, and it's more of like just an excuse because they don't want to take the time, the little time to get yourself better. Like all my friends and people I surround myself with, they all go to the gym and take care of themselves, and just that energy you get from that is amazing. Because when you're around people that don't take care of themselves, you can just feel the energy. You could just, you know
They
what I
drag
mean?
it down.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
really do. And like the moments I've been in the best shape, I've been the happiest, I've been the most outgoing. And then the times that, I may have let myself go a little bit, that's when the negative energy comes in. So,
Yeah, you just feel good all the time. Now that there is
mhm.
something to it in terms of, I know when I'm more like fitness model lean, I get different reactions from people than when I used to do the big bulk cut splits or cycles. So I can get really big really fast. If I'm walking
Yeah.
around at 235, although I'm muscular and I'm very strong, I get a different reaction than when I'm about 185, 190, visible abs and just walking around smiling at
Yeah.
everyone, just feeling good about life. People pick up on that.
Yeah, they definitely do. And I can agree with you on that. When I'm more cut and at the gym, that's when people start noticing a little more like, oh man, like you're cut. And then when I'm, let's say, since I'm bodybuilding and I bulk, I get a little on the heavier side, so you don't get much reactions from that. But
Do you dirty bulk?
I don't dirty bulk, but I just eat so much calories that even if it's healthy, it packs on in a kind of
Yeah.
negative way.
I always say, yeah, when I bulk now, I will do a mini bulk every now and then. So I had a buddy come down to stay with me in October. I was like, all right, I haven't done a bulk cut type thing in years, so I'll do a
Mhm.
mini bulk, and then once I got to where I wanted to go, the further you get into it, unless you go more into like for me like professional bodybuilding territory where there's
Yep.
other things you have to take into consideration. I'm
Hmm.
about I think near the top of the range of my genetic max. So but there's still a few pounds to squeeze out. So my first bulk, I think maybe I put on 30 pounds. 15 of that was muscle. The other 15, it wasn't all body fat. You have a lot of water retention and
Yep.
things of that nature. So I just call it slop. But
Yeah. Yeah.
now since I've done it so many times, it's almost the same effort to like, okay, I want to put on 6 to 10 pounds of new muscle if I even can, and
Hmm.
then or retain that at the end of the day. So it was a mini bulk. I'm a mass monster. I get really big really fast. So after
Right.
6 weeks, I was done, and then I'm lean most of the year round. So I was
Of
like, all
course.
right, so I just need a 6 week, just really light cut, like a 500
Yeah.
calorie day deficit. That was easy to do. So it really
Exactly.
depends on where you're at in the journey, I think.
Yeah, and it's very dependent on your goals. If you're just somebody who wants to just be jacked and lean overall, then you really don't have to bulk that hard. Now, when you're in the beginning phase and you're skinny and you want to get jacked, I believe that you do need to put on a decent amount of size, whether it looks clean or not, just to get the initial things. Because I always say you can't carve a pebble. So you want to
Yeah.
build some, yeah. So you want to get up. You might look a little fat, but I think with most, especially younger guys, you kind of need to go through that. That way, when you cut down, you have some substance to cut with. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I like that saying. I'll start using that too.
Yeah.
That's a great one. I
Yeah.
used the first time I got lean because I was always the big guy, like the big. I'm
Hmm.
about as wide as I am tall. So people would always say like, what? Why are you getting leaner? You look good already. And or if I was going when I was going through the initial diet or hunger pains in the first couple of
Hmm.
cuts I did to get really like single digit lean.
Yeah.
People always ask me, "Oh my god, are you suffering?" And I remember there's a quote I read years ago. It was Aubrey Hepburn. She said, "Nothing tastes as good as feeling skinny." So I just I kind
Yeah.
of just tweaked that to nothing tastes as good as just being jacked. And the first time I got a six
Yes.
pack, I was younger. I went to Coachella, walked around with my shirt off, and girls would
Hmm.
literally just take their tops off and press their tits against me. I was like, you know what? This feels so much better than that
Yeah.
piece of pizza I didn't eat. It doesn't even compare.
And that's another thing too. I kind of wanted to get into was the whole mind game is when you're cutting.
Hmm.
Your mind will play tricks on you, but that's when you go in. You're like, well, nothing will beat getting the results that you're working towards. Like nothing in comparison will. Like
Hmm.
especially like right now, for instance, I'm like super hungry and I want to eat pretty much anything in sight. But you remind yourself that nothing beats when you get to your result. Then you realize like, oh, okay, that was worth it. Um,
Have you
Gotta
ever
watch.
tried doing something? Again, this is
Hmm.
more advanced, and I don't know if it's necessarily a bodybuilding tool. I started doing extended fasts, not
Hmm.
often, at least once a year. I used to do them once a quarter. It
Yep.
was more for spiritual and kind of discipline purposes. But after I
Hmm.
did it, I did like a 1 day fast and 2 day, 3 days. The longest I've gone without eating is 5 days.
Oh
Still keep
wow.
my fluid intake up.
Yeah.
That was more spiritual. After day three, you're in a different headspace. You're not even
I
really on this
bet.
planet. So
Yeah.
then when I go back to a normal cut, it's like, okay, like 500 calorie day deficit, 800 calorie day deficit with maybe a little light cardio. I mean, it's nothing compared to 5 days without eating, which I've done a few times now.
Man, yeah, I personally haven't done anything fasting that crazy, but in the bodybuilding space, it's used as a tool to reset the system in a sense. So, especially when you get to a certain size, your stomach might distend out a little more uncomfortably. So then they use fasting to just, like I said, re jumpstart the body. So, um, I think fasting has its purpose. I don't really recommend it a whole lot unless you're doing it for spiritual reasons. Um, just because, like I said, fasting is great though if you're having bloating issues or really bad gut problems. That's where I put them at.
Yeah, I hold mass, and you notice I'm saying mass and not muscle. So my body can gain
Yeah.
fat, it can hold water, it can put on muscle quick too,
Yeah.
but it can also again hold water or hold fat very easily too. So for me,
Mm.
I've noticed that the skin is just it's a little tighter when I do the intermittent fasting. And it's also at the point where I'm at in my career. I work all the damn time now. So for
Yeah.
me, when I did it, it was more so, okay, rather than 5 to 6 small meals a day, or even like 7, 8, if you're doing a bulk, or, I mean, the number's limitless, but rather
Yeah.
than thinking about eating, preparing my food, eating my food, cleaning up after myself, and then having to do it again in an hour or two, multiple times a day, it's like, all
Yep.
right, I will just do it one meal a day is what I eventually worked up to with my fast. And I've been doing that, I think, 8 or 9 years now.
Oh
And
wow.
also a part of me, since I was obese before, there's that food addiction component. And I used to
Yes.
say that I need to feed the fat kid, feed the fat kid. So yeah, I'm in a severe deficit, but I'm eating 2,000, 3,000 calories in one sitting. So I get to feed the fat kid. I don't use those
Yes.
terms anymore because I got to the point where I had to upgrade the identity. I'm like, I'm not a fat person, so I need to
Yeah.
stop referring to myself as such. So
Right.
now a lot of times when it's time to eat my one meal a day, a lot of times I always start with protein and backfill with fats or carbs, depending upon what
Hmm.
I'm looking to do. But a lot of times it's tough to get the calories in. I hit my
Oh
protein requirements and still have like 2,000 calories left. So guess what? I can eat cookies and cakes and ice cream. Now I will put on a little. I will hold water and I will look kind of sloppy. So as long as
right.
so if I clean that up, then the skin comes in and then the muscle kind of pops out a little more in that 3D muscle look. So I
Yep.
like how you're using, I use the same term. Like everything's a tool. So you'll get guys that get
Mhm.
real religious when they start off 5x5 or German volume training or bro splits or push pull legs or upper lower. It all works. It just depends on what
It
works for you and what
does.
you're looking to do. So I look at it because I've done, I don't know if you have, I've
Hmm.
done it all. And you get different results based on what you're doing. So it's more so, okay, I don't have a lot of time to lift this week, so maybe I'll do 2 a days and then I'll take a week off. I'm always adjusting those variables or stacking multiple tools. So I'm curious, when you got started and you put on
Hmm.
that first initial bit of mass, were you on a basic beginners program? Did you already have the bodybuilding coach, or how did you go from a track runner to
Yeah.
250 pounds?
So, okay, my first year, this is gonna be funny. I got into the whole gym because of Arnold Schwarzenegger. So I went
Oh, he's a
online,
man.
bodybuilding.com, and I looked at the split he did, and it was a 6 day split. So I went from a track runner to an immediate bodybuilder training. So I went into the gym 6 days a week. Some days I would train twice a week. I did way too much. But with my genetics, I was able to grow from that. So I learned early on that I respond very well to high volume. Of
Me too.
course, yes, exactly. So I was training 6 days a week, your typical bro split. And the first 3 months, I went from 150 up to 170 within a 3 month time span. And
Nice.
yeah, the look, it was amazing. I was nice and full. But I would say for most people beginning, I wouldn't do any more than 3 days a week because um, most people don't really know what intensity is. So when you have 3 days a week, that gives your body plenty of rest time. Um, and of course, now I do five. I found my sweet spot. My sweet spot's 5 days a week. So, um,
I do 5 days a week too, and then on the
mhm.
weekend, a lot of times I'll still go to the gym, but it's not programmed in my routine. So I'll do a
Yeah.
touch up day, or I go to these
Hmm.
pool parties all the time. So I'll do
Yeah.
kind of a semi peak week before the pool party, and then the day of, I'll go and just do a full body workout, very light girl weight, high rep, just to give
Yep.
myself a pump, and then carb up a little bit before I drink and dance all day. So you're just again 3D muscles just popping
Oh.
everywhere.
Oh yeah.
I do things like that. I think that is a good point you make. That
Hmm.
I tell my guys a lot of times that less is more. So I'll get, especially
Yes.
younger guys, like, all right, I want to get jacked now, and they'll ask, and they'll have this crazy list of supplements, and they'll have this crazy high volume routine, and they have it all mapped out, which is good. I'm glad
Yeah.
they do that. But you'll have guys come in, or they'll start talking about cycles, and they haven't even been in the gym left. Like, bro, it's the same as when I was a fat guy and I wanted
Yeah.
to start losing weight. All you have to do is move. Just put down the
Seriously.
shit. Like for a fat guy, just put down the shit and then move. And then the first like 50 pounds just come off. I think it's the same for the gym too. If you've never trained before,
Hmm.
you are really taxing your system. You're putting a lot of stress on it. So
Yeah.
those newbie gains, those are no joke. But anytime a guy asks me, hey, I'm just getting into the gym, show you steroids, like, dude, you don't need them. Like,
No.
enjoy the newbie gains. You only
Yeah.
get them once. It's
I
it's
will.
it's insane.
I will say this because at my gym we have a lot of younger people, and they'll always come up and ask me like, "Dude, like, should I do SARMs and tests?" And I always say this. I'm like, "Listen, when you're brand new to the gym, you're already on a cycle. It is your
Yes.
job."
Oh,
And
great point.
I always say this. I'm like, this is the best time to take it serious because if I could have gone back, I would have gone back and gave myself a 4 to 5 meal diet and just train hard, and you will grow so much within your first 3 to 6 months. It's not even funny. Like especially when you're in your teens, when you start in the gym, your test levels are already at a cycle. So use that. So your first year, you can completely do a 180 flip. You can surprise yourself without any touching any supplement. I mean, it's wild.
Yeah, I usually tell guys try to get it at or near your genetic max, and if you don't know what that
Yes.
is, Google it. There's calculators all
Yeah.
over. You can get a pretty good idea. I do DEXA scans,
Yes.
so it took me a few years to figure out what mine truly is. I hover
Yep.
about that, and I obviously to go over my genetic max. There's other things I have to introduce to my system that I'd rather not do at this point in my journey,
Mhm.
and
Most definitely.
and so I always recommend for a lot of younger guys, yeah, build that initial mass first, take advantage of those newbie gains, but also give
Yes.
yourself time to learn how to diet and learn how your body responds to things before you start
Hmm.
throwing more tools at it. You always want to
Yes.
leave yourself room to go. If you throw everything at it at once, then what happens when you plateau? You have nothing left.
I'll say this. I think most people shouldn't even consider most anabolics or anything like that, just because that is a whole nother playing field. I always say
It's a
you
different
need to.
level, yeah.
It is, and you need to fall in love with the training and diet and the journey, because this is what I tell people too. I'm like, the end result's fun, but I get the most enjoyment through the journey. Like you learn a lot about yourself. And when you start throwing in other compounds when you're new, you're gonna mess up your hormones and then you start losing your mind a little bit because you don't know what it's like to go in a calorie deficit natural. You don't know what it's like to bulk natural. You don't know what your body feels. You don't know what any of that feels like. So you need to spend your first 4 to 5 years, I would say, honestly, natural to understand your body. That way, when you start taking these enhanced supplements, you know, like, okay, this is just the compounder. This isn't actually me. Because before that, you're just going to be playing with too much variables, and it gets very confusing very quickly.
I kind of screwed up. I
Hmm.
lost the 100 pounds, and then I was in the gym for a year or two, and then
Yeah.
I came down here to Mexico about I'm dating myself like 20 years ago, and I played baseball down here. So we had coaches and dietitians and
Hmm.
nutritionists and all that, and then the attitude in Mexico at the time was, it's still probably still is. everyone just went on cycle here. So I did a couple of test only cycles when I was
Yeah.
younger, but I was
Hmm.
under the guidance of pharmacologists and coaches and dietitians, nutritionists. Now, when I came into my adulthood, and I've never once in my adult life not gone to the gym consistently, but there's about an
Right.
8 year period there to where I wasn't tracking my diet. I wasn't actually, so I always make the distinction. There's
Hmm.
guys that go to the gym. Okay, that's just, you show up, you'll see them. They're sitting on the massage chair. So you went to the gym, but you didn't do
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
There's guys that work out. So I was in that workout phase for 8 years where
Mm.
I went there and I did stuff, but I didn't know what I was doing, why I was doing. There wasn't like, I didn't track anything. There was no goals. And then there's guys who
Right.
train. So
Yes.
there's that 8 year period to where I was natural, although I had cycled before.
Hmm.
I was just working out. And then I got to the
Yeah.
point where like, all right, I'm going to start training. And the more time that I took to learn how to train, I eventually did go on to TRT as I got into my early 30s. I take
Yep.
the most minimum dose and I stay within my natural range.
Yes.
The high end of the range, the very high end of the range, I'm consistently at the high end, but it is in my natural range. And, I realize having those two comparison points that me at a very, very low dose of test,
Hmm.
I have such a nicer physique than I did doing crazy amounts when I was a kid and
Yes.
didn't really know what I was doing. So it
Hmm.
might not be the best advice coming from me, but I like to be honest about these topics to where I did do
Yes.
this cycle thing a couple of times when I was younger. And for
Hmm.
me, if I could go back, I would have waited too. Like you said, newbie
Yeah.
gains, learning how your body works. Now that I know how my body works, these last few years as an adult, I have a lot of guys ask, what's next? What's next? What can I add to the stack? And for the last 3 or 4 years, it's what can I take out? And I've learned that since I've set my baseline about, I've been about this same shape and size for the last 8 years or so. It's more
Very well.
so no matter what I do, it just maintains. So I don't need this
Yeah.
stuff anymore. So I've been bringing everything down. I've been cutting out all the
Yep.
supplements, cutting out all
Hmm.
the whatever. All my nutrition comes from diet, and it is really nice to get to that point. So enjoy the journey. It is a long term
Yes.
journey.
100%. That's like I'm so big on that because I mean, when I first began, I always thought like more food, more training equals better results. In reality, you just have to, and this goes into learning your body, is you have, but you do have to go through those phases where you have to figure out how much is too much and then scale back from there. So you do have a good point though. And there is a caveat to taking TRT. If you're in your late 30s to 40s and your testosterone levels are below like average, then I would consider using that. But for most people, they don't need to. They don't really need it.
To be honest, the thought goes to
Mhm.
my head. I've been on it since right after I turned 30 or so. I'm 37 now. And
Yep.
the thought goes to my head like, I probably don't need it. I probably could restart myself naturally because I've optimized everything for so
Yes.
long that I think the body will take to it. The first couple of times, like I went through an endocrinologist. So before they put you on TRT, especially if you're below 30, they want to try to restart you naturally. So I did a Clomid
Hmm.
monotherapy, which is just a typical post cycle therapy. For bodybuilding, like a Clomid or Novodex type monotherapy. Then I did an HCG monotherapy, and it did bring my natural level up to the low end of natural range. But when I came off, it went down. It was still higher than when I
Mm.
started, but it wasn't where I wanted to be. And I have a couple of theories. It could have been because I cycled when I was young. I think that's another reason not to do it when you're super young until
Yeah.
you kind of get a little more experience. Even I did proper post cycle therapy, but I think that could have led to it being lower in my later years. I also did a
Yeah.
vegan diet for 3 years before that, and I went to an endocrinologist in Texas. Like, dude, he's like, you literally shut yourself down. He's like,
Oh yeah.
you need that saturated animal fat to naturally synthesize into testosterone. Oops.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep.
and then I have a theory that since I was overweight as a kid, I was never not fat until I was 17 or 18. So I
Yeah.
think that screws up your body too, especially when you're going through puberty and those developmental stages. To have all of that stress on your system,
Oh man.
I think it knocks your endocrine system out of whack a little bit. I used to think I had thyroid
Yes.
problems and stuff like that. I've done genetic testing. I do have the genes for that, but they're not
Mhm.
active. So I don't have any active, you do all your bloods and all that stuff too when you're on TRT. So I don't have any
Right.
active thyroid problems. There is an underlying gene to where it maybe could happen, but I don't do things that could make that happen. So I think really just being overweight as a kid really threw everything out of whack. And the reason, I know I'm getting winded here, you want to
Yeah,
look at
you're
your
good.
body as an overall system. So make sure,
Yes.
that there are indicators, test everything. And again, is you have more experience, then you can start throwing in new variables because you understand how
Hmm.
everything comes together in a very complex manner.
Exactly. And I think touching on that subject is I don't think most people realize the effects from, using performing enhancing substances because if you do need to take a look at your own blood work in your family line too, because if you have underlying heart conditions,
Yes.
thyroid issues, that the drugs will only increase the chances of you getting it. So you need to make sure you just do your due diligence and get all your blood scans and stuff before the time that you do make the decision, kind of see where you're at. That way you have a baseline to compare towards because so many people will immediately go into it without having a baseline measurement and then it's hard for them and it's hard for doctors to kind of gauge where you're at. So I really
Mhm.
think considering all your factors, really make sure you're at a relatively good spot naturally and that you have all the bloodline and stuff figured out. Another thing I want to say too is most people have their families have bad genetics because their family never took care of themselves. So that's another
Yep.
consideration to take into account. Because like in my family, they're on my dad's side, they're all diabetic, overweight, and have all these problems. But if you look deeper, it's because they didn't take care of themselves. So here I am. My dad has an autoimmune disease that runs in my family, but I have no symptoms of it, no
Mhm.
problems or anything because I take care of myself. So those are relative things to take into account.
Yep. And as I mentioned, I've done the genetic testing too. You go to like
Mhm.
23andMe, Ancestry.com, you swab
Yep.
yourself, send it to the lab. Yeah, they'll tell you, like, surprise, surprise, I'm mostly European. But they'll give you, you can export your raw data. And then there's third party providers to where you can send them that information. And they'll tell you things like, I have the potentiality for a thyroid issue if
Hmm.
I do these things. And it'll
Yes.
say in the recommendations, maintain below this body fat. Okay, done. They'll say you may possibly have cognitive decline, but these things will prevent against that. Well, there are already things I'm doing, and it was nice because when I got the genetic results back or the analysis, there are a lot of the most of the recommendations are things I was already doing, but I had to learn it the hard way. It's like, why am I tired?
Exactly.
Why am I doing this? Maybe I should change this variable and test it for 30 days. And then so after a while you figure it out. Whereas if I had just got the genetic testing done from the get go, it's like, oh, don't do this, do this. And
Yeah.
if you ever look into epigenetics, this could be a whole nother stream. It's the idea that your genetic programming is essentially like a computer code, and there's certain things that can turn them on or activate them or deactivate them. So
Right.
in this result, it showed like a plus minus, like, okay, you do have this gene. Here's how you
Mhm.
activate it. Here's how you deactivate it based on, and they have a large pool of people they've done genetic testing on, and they'll ask you like, hey, like I'm at higher risk for diabetes. I have diabetes, my dad's side of the family too.
Right.
However, I don't have the type of diet to activate or develop diabetes. It's not going to happen
Exactly.
for me. I don't allow it to happen, but the gene is still there. So based on that
Yes.
giant data aggregate, they can give you this real accurate information, which is really quite cool. So I
Yeah, no,
hate it when
that's
people say it's my genetics, and I always tell them, well, look at your granddad, or for you maybe your great granddad. All of them were in World War II. Look at his war photos. Were any of them fat? Any of them? Not a
no.
single one of them. That's your
Nope.
genetics.
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, for most people out there, if as long as you eat healthy, you take care of yourself, you're really not going to run into most issues. I mean,
No.
for being honest, unless they're super underlying, but most people, you just need a healthy diet and move around, and you'll be okay.
Yeah, I'm of the mindset it's kind of hippy dippy, but the food is your medicine, which I used to never understand this. When I was
Yeah.
fat, there's a mentality that comes with being fat too, to where oh, maybe I can take a diet pill, or maybe I can take this, or no, you just gotta learn how your body works and then start to love yourself, and eventually it'll all kind of fall in line. But the idea that food is medicine,
Yep.
I was diagnosed ADHD as a kid too, so they had me on stimulants since I was a little guy.
Ooh.
I weaned myself off in my early 20s, but for me, that idea that food is medicine was so foreign. It's like, no, no way. It's just I didn't even view it as an energy source. I think it was kind of more psychological or kind
Yeah.
of emotional eating that I did to that point. But eventually, as the body starts coming together, like I don't even need Adderall because I can manage my
Hmm.
mood with food or not eating food, which is a tool too. Intermittent fasting does help really well for ADHD guys out there. So
Yeah.
look into that.
I will say that that's a huge point right there because the past 5 years I've really like I've gained so much clarity because before I started getting into fitness and stuff, growing up, I would just eat whatever I wanted, and I had like growing up, I had really bad anxiety and insecurities. And I would eat candy all day, drink Coca-Cola with all the sugar. I didn't realize that that actually all plays into anxiety and ADHD. Because growing up,
Drug.
yeah, and I grew up having ADHD. Luckily, my parents didn't put me on any medication, but I had to learn. Once I learned dieting and how to eat healthy and avoid certain things, all that stuff went away. Like my anxiety and stress levels now are very manageable because I eat a very clean
Yeah.
diet. I drink, I drink 0 calorie stuff, no extra sugars. And especially when I'm in cuts, I'll tell you this, I find more peace. I find myself more peaceful when I'm the most depleted because I don't have any of those
Me too.
extra, yeah, exactly, because I don't have any of those extra sugars and stuff. And then, like you were saying, food is definitely medicine, and once you switch to eating healthier, you just look and feel more at peace, if that makes sense.
It definitely makes sense. I've noticed that too. We already mentioned that lifting weights is kind of meditative.
Yeah.
That's why I do those extended fasts. It's mostly spiritual,
Hmm.
but I think it is too, in the sense that you're not throwing a bunch of stuff in your body. So it's not focusing on the process of digesting food or the nutrient partitioning or the storing of glycogen or fat or whatever biological processes it has to do.
Yeah.
When you take that burden off your system, then your brain can reallocate resources to do other things that maybe you've never done before. So after, like for me, after 3 days of fasting, you go into autophagy, I think at like hour 18 or something. It's a process
Hmm.
where your body essentially takes out the trash. It gets rid of all your bad cells. But
Yeah.
after that, like your body has nothing else to do. So your consciousness is 100% here. And then it starts going here and here and here. And you're like, uh-oh, what's going on
Yeah.
here?
Well, and I will say this too, when you truthfully and truly eat clean for a very long time, I dare you to go try like McDonald's or something. You won't even like it doesn't even like it's okay, but you realize like it's not even all that good. And another thing I wanted to get into is the whole I don't know how long we have or anything, but the whole
Oh, we're good.
process. Okay, the whole processed food stuff is I don't think people take this into account. When you eat ultra processed food, that's pre-digested food. So think about that for a second. Like
Uh-huh.
all the snacks and stuff, they're made to where they break everything down and then put it in. So that's why you can eat 2,000 calories from McDonald's way easier and still be hungry. So when you take that into account and you look at the brain, it actually affects the brain in your cognitive mind because when you're eating all that processed stuff, it makes you super fogged up and cloudy. And then when you switch to whole foods and you're eating ingredients that are more natural and stuff, you get the clarity because of that. That plays a huge factor in it.
I definitely agree with that. When I was overweight as a kid, I was really good in school. Didn't even really have to
Yeah.
try. Always near the top of my class, and I always thought I was a smart person. But it wasn't until, and I'd look at people that were fit, and you had the dumb jock stereotype.
Oh yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
actually, I didn't realize how I was slowing myself down until I lost all the weight and got in shape. And then that was about the time I was in college or grad school. Oh
Yeah.
my God, I was performing at a completely different level cognitively as well. It's amazing what food or the lack thereof can do for you.
Yeah. Well, and one of the cooler things about that too is when you get a guy that's super overweight and he can't focus, and then you literally just switch the diet within a few months, they're just like a huge noticeable change, and I think it's honestly amazing how you could just do that with just food because so many people
Yeah,
want
isn't
to
that
take
crazy?
yeah, because so many people want to know the best supplement, the best focus supplement, when in reality, it's all just diet. Diet ties into everything, literally.
I wish I'd known that when I was younger. Again, for that like 8 year period where I was working out but not training, I used to
Yeah,
think, well, I'm going to the gym, so I should be in better shape. And then it
yeah,
wasn't until I really got surgical with my diet that just everything just next level.
yeah,
Everything became so much easier.
yeah. And I always tell people too, you can have the world's best training program, but if your diet isn't in check, nothing's really going to change.
I
That's a
always
huge
said
thing.
you can't out train a bad diet, or what is it?
No,
Abs are made in the kitchen, not in the gym. You hear those around the
exactly.
space as well.
Yeah,
So I'm curious. You mentioned that you have a bodybuilding competition coming up. You're 2 weeks out, so
Yeah,
congratulations. You're in
thank
the
you,
you're in the
thank you.
dog days of it. Although I've always noticed with my buddies, and my brothers used to compete too. They'll get really, really, really dialed in to go on stage, and a lot of them they're always like, I feel so deflated, I feel so flat, and then afterwards we'll go to like a Chinese buffet and they'll have a couple whiskeys, and then the next day they're just just popping.
Yes. No, I'm right now. I'm at the point where we're getting to the point where we're the diet's so low in carbs that we're gonna flatten out. So I definitely feel it right now. I'm in that stage of kind of
You
foggy
feel weak too,
brain.
right?
I feel weak. Cardio, like even just walking from my apartment to my car, sometimes just like, oh boy, like it's
Uh-huh.
like a chore in itself. But I will say I'm excited for it. We just got 2 more weeks, and then but it is crazy. After the show, I'm gonna have a nice meal. But it's just crazy. Most bodybuilders look better than what they did on stage just from eating all that food. Because then you'll wake up the
Yeah.
next day, your muscles fill out and you're still super tight. It's a cool feeling to get for sure.
Again, I do something like that before, like these. I go to a lot of these rooftop pool parties here in Mexico.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the who's who of Mexico City, and or music festivals in the U.S. I'll do a couple music
Oh
festivals a
yeah.
year, so I'll still do a peak week. I'll train like a bodybuilder,
Yep.
and then at the music festival, guys, this is not health advice. Like disregard the last 50 minutes.
Yeah.
This is not healthy. But
No,
coming to
no,
the
not
music
at all.
festival, I'll literally just go to Costco, buy a couple giant boxes of Rice Krispie treats, beef
Yeah.
jerky, and a couple handles of whiskey, and that's all I consume all weekend. And I'm fucking jacked because alcohol is the fourth macro. A lot of people don't know that. Again, don't
Yes.
do
Mm,
not do not include alcohol in your diet and be like, oh, it's the fourth
no.
macro, but it technically is. Like the body has to
Yes.
prioritize it.
Yes.
It
Yes.
it will dehydrate you. So I know a lot of my bodybuilding buddies. They'll have
Yeah.
like a drink of just a pure spirit the night before too, just to
Yep.
squeeze some more of that water out. Sometimes.
I will say, okay, so on topic too, when you get to this part of health and fitness, this is the dicey side that gets
Mm-hmm.
can get very dangerous. But um, yeah, so when you're a bodybuilder and you're going into peak week, that it's kind of I don't want to say scary, but it's definitely not fun because you don't have any carbs. You're eating protein and you're barely drinking water, so it does get very
Yeah,
dicey. Some people use diuretics. I don't think they're necessary. That's just adding more
I don't
flame
think
to the
so
bone.
either.
But I will say the night before, a lot of people, like myself, my first competition, I took a shot and then wake up the next morning and you're just completely dried out because alcohol does dry you out. So makes you
It
dehydrated.
does.
It
Speeds up your
does.
kidneys too. So, and that's
Yeah.
that's why I'm saying it's not health advice. I
Yes.
planned this going into it. At
Oh,
these
oh yeah.
rooftop parties, we we
Yep.
we do. I'm honest with my audience, so we do
Hmm.
MDMA too, like light doses of Molly or like ecstasy
Right.
without the amphetamine. It's just the MDMA, and
Okay.
I get it from a lab here in Mexico, so it's good stuff.
Oh, it's so cool.
And but you have to plan for that. So I have supplements on the counter in terms of I'm going to deplete all my serotonin. If I don't want to be depressed for a couple weeks, here's how I prepare for it. And then here's
Yep.
what I do before, during, immediately after, and then the weeks after
Hmm.
to make sure that so for me, like I don't have come
Yeah.
downs. People are always like, "Oh man, I feel crazy. How'd you do that? 3 days
Yeah.
of dancing in the desert and doing Molly. How the hell do you do?" I was like, but I came into it knowing the brain chemistry behind it too. It's the same with your body. So I'm
Yes.
not saying go and take a bunch of shots and you're going to get jacked, but when you
No.
understand how your body works, alcohol does have that diuretic effect. And to be honest, when you're that depleted, it does kind
Hmm.
of suck. So like a whiskey, it hits you. One whiskey hits you harder when you're
Oh
completely
man.
depleted than if you're a big fat guy and you're just throwing them back.
Well, and I'll tell you what too, when you're that depleted, one shot for me at least, that it doesn't get me drunk, but it definitely is like, okay, it definitely does
Like,
something.
oh, yeah.
I'm laying in the, well, it kind of helps though when you're that depleted, it kind of gets your mind off stuff, but I definitely, my first competition, I took that shot and I laid there, I was like, I can handle that, but when you're so
Uh,
depleted, your body just absorbs it. Another thing I wanted to add on is when you're doing competitions or like you said events, when you're doing those peak weeks, everything is tracked and managed. So we're
mhm.
controlling it. It's nothing like uncontrolled. So if we had to, we could almost immediately kind of snap out of it if for health reasons. So that's another disclaimer.
Yeah, exactly that. And I'm kind of like that too. I kind of know it all in my head, but if I
Yeah.
have, for example, if someone wants to do like a fitness photo shoot, all right, how
Yeah.
long out? If you ever do the fitness route at some point,
Hmm.
um, people, I always keep myself like, all right, I'm 2 or 3 weeks out from being like fitness model ready. But usually
Yes.
something will come up like a day or two out. They'd be like, hey, we casted someone for this commercial and he bailed, or hey, there wasn't chemistry with the actress, so we need you instead. And I'm an American who lives
Yeah.
in Latin America, so anytime a casting call goes out for a classic American look that's in my age range and height and all that
Right.
stuff, I'm like, I'm gonna get the part. So
Yeah.
it's
No,
usually
cool.
so
Yeah.
it's usually like a day or two out. But like you said, these things are all controlled for, and
Yep.
when I'm throwing new variables into the mix, and the game is never really over. So
Mm-mm.
you'll start throwing new variables in. It depends on what your risk versus reward tolerance is. Again, I'm not
Yeah.
doing crazy bodybuilding doses of pharmaceutical enhancement. But there's other variables I can play with.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about
Of course.
reducing same volume, doing less frequency in terms of days in the gym lifting weights, and doing like a yoga day or maybe a
Yes.
biking day. Or when I'm dating, I date quite a few girls too. That for my
Hmm.
cardio, I include that physical activity as part of my diet. And in my head,
Yeah.
there's always, because I've tracked so long for so many years, I just kind of know the count in my head. Or
Right.
buy like a portion of meat. I'm like, oh, is that 100 grams? And then sometimes I'll second guess myself. I'll put it on the food scale. I'm off by a
Hmm.
gram or two. Like so you kind
Oh
of
yeah.
you kind of know after a while.
Exactly, and that's another good topic to bring up. So once you get in the beginning stages, I believe you need everything super structured because you
Mhm.
need to program your mind. But once you're at a point in your fitness journey, you get to a point where you just know off the top of your head because you've done it so much. Like for most, especially lifestyle guys, like for me, bodybuilding, I'm always structured, but that's just the name of the game. But when you're just trying to stay in good shape, you'll
Just
get
look
to a
good.
point, yeah, just look good. You'll realize very quickly how it's very easy to catch on. It is.
Yeah, and it's really nice when you get to that point. So for any new
Oh
guys
yeah.
listening, if you're curious, I'm assuming we're getting into some more advanced stuff here too. But
Hmm.
if you're on the
Yep.
fence, or maybe like I mentioned, you're the guy who goes to the gym or the guy who works out, but you don't train, maybe try training. And again, I make that distinction that training is just tracking all the variables until
Yes.
until you figure it out. I,
Right.
I, I don't know if you do this too. I've done crazy stuff where I make my first time I got a six pack. I used to tell
Mhm.
myself, well, I used to be fat. It's impossible for you to get a six pack. It's my genetics. I still held on to that lie,
Right.
even when I wasn't fat anymore. And then I just put a spreadsheet together. I was like, it's all a science. It's just
Yeah.
thermodynamics. And
Hmm.
then when you get into the macronutrient part, and like you start with the caloric equation, then you go macronutrition, which really affects your consistency. Then for
Yep.
overall health, you get into the micronutrition, and then there's just more.
Oh
You
yeah.
get to a level, and there's just something else to learn or something else to add that just makes you a little bit better and a little bit easier once you get that experience.
And that's what I truthfully love about bodybuilding and fitness in general is you're never done learning. Like I'm still learning advanced things. I work with a bodybuilding coach, but I learn from him. So whenever we're doing stuff, I'm like, can you explain why? Because like I said, when you first start off, it's about, well, how much protein do I need? But I'm at the point now where it's like, how does like carb cycling work, or how do these like
Mhm.
how does fish oil impact how my physique looks, or how does certain vitamins? I'm getting to that point now. Um, but it's a lot more fun when you get past the beginning phase and then you get into like the I call it getting into the weeds of things.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I remember the first time I hired a bodybuilding coach, he took a look at me and he would just tell me, okay, eat this at this time of day, eat this, and that. And I'm more academic by
Yeah.
nature. So I was like, well, why is that? He's like, don't ask why, just do it, just do it.
Yeah.
But I learned, I actually hired him during COVID because all the gyms were closed in California. He converted his detached garage into a gym.
Oh,
And all these small gyms all went out of business. So it was super cheap at first to buy weights. And then a couple months in, it was ridiculous. They were
oh
super
yeah.
overpriced, like
Yes.
wild fluctuations in the weight market, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I trained with him all summer when we were locked down for COVID. There's nothing else to do. I lost my job. They closed our damn beaches. Like all the tour stuff was closed.
Yeah.
And we just trained in the garage. And so I didn't learn how to diet from him. I didn't learn how to structure routine from him, but I learned just kind of the pace. He trained a
Yes.
lot quicker than I was used to. That's where I started doing the reduced rest times because yeah, he did a higher rep scheme, higher volume. We'd
Hmm.
just go, he'd go in and go, and then me, and there was no stopping, and it felt really good. It felt more like athletic training. And
Yeah.
having done that, again, if I did all the research and looked at everything scientifically in the space,
Hmm.
maybe that's not the best way to train, but my body responded so well, and I felt good,
Yes.
and I enjoyed it. It was almost like I was just dancing the whole time. There was a rhythm and a movement to it, and I just look
Yes.
forward to training
Exactly.
that way, and I still train that way now.
Yeah, and that's like I said, that's the beauty of messing around with stuff until you find something that feels good. Because like you said, you can look at things from a scientific approach and be like, well, scientifically, this is supposed to get me results. But if you don't enjoy that, you're not going to
Yes.
stick with it. So it's literally just finding out what works, and like I said before, and sticking with it. That's like the huge grand scheme of things.
Oh, I had a girl I'm seeing the other day. She texted me. She's just getting into the gym. A lot of these Mexican girls, they do have good genetics, and
Yeah.
well, you have to walk everywhere around here too. But I saw her earlier today. I was like, "You've never seriously been in the gym before?" She's a couple weeks in, and I think last night or the night before, she texted me. She's like, "My neck really hurts. I'm doing these shoulder lifts, and like, should I just power through it?" I'm like, "Don't do lifts that are going to make you hurt." Or
Yeah.
when guys ask, "What routine should I do?" The one that you can stick to consistently. What diet should I do? The one that works and you can do consistently. Well, it's like,
Yes.
should I do heavy deadlifts? It hurts my lower back. I'm like, well, are you looking forward to doing deadlifts? Oh no, I dread it. Well, do shit you're going to look forward to doing. Because I used to be of that mindset
Yes.
too. Free weights only, free weights only. Most of my lifts now are like, oh, machines are for guys that are less masculine or whatever, that are pussies.
Yeah.
And
Right.
but for me, it's like I just do lifts I enjoy. I'm just concerned about
Hmm.
the total volume that is, or the total energy. Yeah, total volume is
Yeah.
kind of what I go for. So I don't really care how I'm stimulating the muscle. So if I had
Yes.
to choose between something that makes my shoulder pop and creak and make my elbows click, or something, okay, maybe it doesn't look as cool and maybe I don't lift as heavy, but I maintain the same physique and like doing it, then I just do that. And that's what I tell my guys too.
Exactly. And when I got to a point where I didn't, right now I'm tracking my training, but before then I call it instinctual training. So training off of what
Mhm.
my body responds best to. I don't know if you're familiar with the bodybuilder Jay Cutler.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I developed that mindset of I'm gonna go in the gym and like do everything by instinct on how I feel, and I actually got really good results doing that too. Because if something hurt and didn't feel right, like say a back squat, I'd go over and do a hack squat, and
Mhm.
really just fine tune like what works the best. Because if you're trying to do this long term, then you need to, like you said, you need to train with what feels good and what doesn't hurt you. So if you're doing shoulder presses with dumbbells and it hurts your shoulders, then stop doing them. Go to a
Yeah.
machine. It's kind of, it sounds to us, it sounds like common sense, but I'm sure there's people out there that are still struggling with that.
Yeah, and for me, I can do the quick math in my head. So I do have a baseline routine at all times. Usually,
Yeah.
my maintenance one is the go to one. My bodybuilding coach gave me when I got my first six pack and real jacked a few years ago for the first time, and
Yeah.
so I kind of structured around there. But in real time, I'll be doing something to where like, okay, I did chest today, but this shoulder's kind of off, and I have shoulders maybe on this day, and I'm pairing it with this. I'll literally just in my head just change things around in real time, or hey, you know what? I should be lifting this weight today, but I just don't have the energy and I'm real stressed and I don't have a lot of rest time I can take. So I'll reduce the total weight lifted by 33%, but I'll increase
Yep.
the reps by 33% and reduce rest by 33%. And just do the quick math. And then I do that as a
Exactly.
baseline. And then once you do that enough, like you said, lifting on the feels, when I'm in maintenance mode, I don't track anything at all. I just go on
Mm.
feels. Just
Exactly.
you can kind of feel, when you're, but one, every training session or every day, I say training sessions in case you do multiple sessions a day, but every
Hmm.
session there's a goal. And there's
Yes.
some days where I just don't feel up to it. It's like the goal is just to get the blood moving like that. And
Right.
it's
Right.
not an off day because I build off days in my schedule, so I'll just bump
Yeah.
my splits around.
Exactly. And that's another thing too is like so for my instance is I am like I said I am a bodybuilder, so everything I do is very very structured because we're trying to coming up in the off season. My training program is going to be more strength. Like we're going to really be
Mhm.
pushing strength and food because we're trying to build that dense muscle. Um,
Mhm.
but for most people, you know, really just focus on the a good program is like we said, is something that feels good, but also keeps your heart rate up in that.
Mhm.
Maybe it's not about weight, but it's more about intensity, so hypertrophy type of thing.
Mhm. Alrighty, so I do got to get going here in a minute. So let's
Okay.
start signing it off.
Yeah.
We didn't have too much engagement in the chat. I think I did this stream a little earlier than I did. Oh, it's Friday. Oh, duh. I usually do
Oh,
them like Monday to Thursday. Yeah,
that's fair.
yeah. My followers are cool. They're going out. Not that I'm dissing the handful of you guys on
Yeah.
here. So any comments? Let's see. We get better looking with age. I agree. I agree with that. Although I'm at the age where girls can tell that I'm aging. Like I don't look like
Oh
I'm in my
man.
20s anymore by any means. But it hasn't slowed me down when it comes to dating or any of that stuff. Very
Right.
hard to gain that much weight. Yeah, you said something earlier too. It is hard to gain that much weight. So when guys come to me with
Yes.
excuses like, "Oh, I can't lose. I can't get in shape because I don't have the time. I don't have the budget. I don't have the energy." It's those
Oh,
common excuses. I've
yeah.
tracked all that too. It's actually cheaper to be healthy and it's faster to be healthy and you have way more time and you make more money. So, and like
Yes.
a pound of chicken breast is not as expensive as going and getting a Big Mac meal. It's just not.
The one
Maybe
thing,
maybe it used to be, but
yeah.
now it's not.
Well, even though I'm a younger guy, I've been eating like a bodybuilder for years now, and I've saved so much money just because I decided just to buy my own food and stay
I
healthy.
cook my
That's
own
it.
meals.
Yeah,
Yeah, just not eating out.
for the past 5 years, I've only cooked my own food. Now, of course, I go out every now and then, but for the most part, it's cheaper and it's a lot more convenient, in my opinion.
Mhm. Yeah. So guys, oh, do we not? Oh, it looks like we don't have our little banners up on the screen. That's absolutely fine. So,
Okay.
Zach, let us know where people can find you, how you can help them out.
Yep.
If you're selling anything, have any way you can be of assistance to them, and then
Mhm.
I'll go ahead and wrap it up because I
Yeah.
have an appointment here in a few minutes that I got
Yeah.
to get
No
to.
worries. Yeah. So you guys can find me on Instagram at Zachary Aldrich, two H's. Right now, I'm offering one-on-one coaching. Just come and message me, and we can get you started.
All right, perfect. And guys, you know me, I won't do the pitch. Just you know what? Instead of giving you a sales pitch, how about you just subscribe, share, comment, refer this to friends, and all that good stuff. If you need to find me, you can find me on Instagram at Jaron Scott. As always, I have my link tree there, so you'll know what I'm up to in other areas of my life. And that being said and done, I'd like to thank you all for stopping on by. And until next time, I shall bid you all farewell.